just to make sure that you are with us, that you can see the first slide of our webinar, and that you can hear my speaking. Let's see. Welcome to Add Shading, Stop Fading, Start Creating with Frosted Matte Thread. That's a very long title, but this is a thread that we feel has a lot to offer. It is definitely not frosted, and it does take its work very seriously when it comes to performance. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Alice Wolf. I'm the Education Manager here at Madeira, USA. I'm joined by Nancy Minnie, who is the Senior Marketing Coordinator and Backing Specialist at Madeira and our resident embroiderer. Today we'd like to fill you in on a specialty embroidery thread that you might be missing out on. Frosted Matte is a truly matte finish embroidery thread designed for high-speed commercial embroidery machines, and it's capable of very unique visual effects, like this image of a painting that was digitized for embroidery and stitched out in frosted matte. Our goal today is to make you aware of the specialty thread because it can set you apart from your competition. Nancy, how about starting with a description of frosted matte and some of its attributes?
Thank you, Alice, and thank you all for joining us today. So what can frosted matte do for you today? Well, these cute little sheep here were stitched out in frosted matte, and you'll probably hear me say a couple times throughout the webinar how frosted matte gives you a vivid high definition color. This was, I thought, a great stitch out to start with, especially with that nice bright blue in there, and you're able to actually see such clarity when it comes to this thread, the bright orange that's used on the noses or the faces as well. But I think even most importantly, look at those black outlines that were done in the frosted matte and the clarity and the definition that it gives to those designs. So really cute design, just showcasing the colors and what frosted matte can do for you. So you do get that pure and eye-catching matte finish, and it also stands up to the sunlight without fading. We're going to show you some testing that was done with that. And you know, when you're embroidering on stuff that's on the outside, it's important that it's not going to fade, and you're going to get that with this polyester matte finish thread. So it's very exceptional when it's used for the fine detailing, and that is due to the fact that it's actually slightly thinner than your standard rayon and polyester 40-weight threads that you might be used to using. So additionally, you're actually, because it is a little bit thin, you're going to also get extreme clarity with this thread in the small letterings and logos that are within the emblems, or corporate logos. Is actually what we're talking about here. So corporate logos are very big within the embroidery industry, and underneath those corporate logos very often you're going to see a slogan that that company actually tries to live by, and those letters that are in those slogans, because they're trying to say a lot, are really tiny. And similar to a 60-weight thinner thread, frosted matte can give you even more clarity because there is no shine to the thread itself. So it also is going to give you a rich, high-end look of sophistication when you use it tone on tone. We have some examples of that coming up as well. And last but not least, it gives a soft, safe, subtle look to the infant and children's wear garments that you might be embroidering on. And again, we'll have some more examples of that.
And perhaps most importantly, I'm going to come back to this point again, your knowledge of running frosted matte, of the effects that it can produce and the items whose color fastness it will improve. These can all set you apart from your competition. This always seems to be something that you read about in trade publications, and it's an aspect that Madeira is really behind. If you get to know the specialty threads, you're able to offer customers something that your competition can't. At this point, I do want to encourage everyone to write in questions. We are taking note of all of them. We'll answer as many as we possibly can in real time, but we'll also collect all of them, and we'll answer them all, and we'll email the complete set of Q&A out to all of you.
So let's briefly get to know frosted matte. Since it is the only true matte finished embroidery thread on the market today, we've seen cotton threads, sewing thread used for embroidery with poor results. And this is actually one of the reasons why Madeira decided to create this matte finish thread. for the embroidery industry. So with less shiny matte finish trending on such wide variety of products, as you can see here, there's every reason to believe that you can bring this trend of matte finish to your embroidered products with Frosted Matte. But beware the substitution of sewing threads.
And I just want to re-emphasize what Nancy mentioned, the use of cotton sewing thread. Cotton sewing thread was produced for garment construction. It was never, ever intended for decoration. So you really want to be careful if it's the matte finish that you're after. Sewing thread is not really the best way to go. As you can see from this photograph that is obviously enlarged, the strands of thread, of sewing thread, are very hairy. They're not smooth like an embroidery thread. And this is going to have a real detrimental effect on a design, especially one that has a lot of detail. So you want to make sure that this is not something that you go to if matte finish is what you're after. You'll find that your design outline stitches won't be crisp and clean. Your whole design overall would lack quality. Sewing thread has a wax finish on it that embroidery thread does not. This can build up in the machine. It can end up on your fabric, which is another thing that you don't want. It's not meant to run on embroidery machines. It's not particularly color fast to sunlight. And whether you do your own digitizing or have it done outside, it's more difficult to digitize, so the results in the ultimate design are not going to be what you're after. So this is another point that we just want to emphasize. Sewing thread is not your go-to thread for matte finish. But on the other hand, Nancy?
So on the other hand, Frosted Matte was specifically manufactured for embroidery purposes. And when it comes to embroidery thread, you always have to consider anything from a single head or single needle, single head machine that's not going to run all that fast all the way up to that commercial embroidery machine that can run up to, if not more than 1,200 stitches a minute. So because of that reason, embroidery thread is created differently than sewing thread. So having this matte finished embroidery thread on hand is going to, again, give you those high definition colors. It's going to hold up to bleach because it's actually made of polyester. Again, you got that the prolonged exposure to sun. It's not going to fade. Much like our poly-neon thread, the colors are very similar and can easily be matched over there. Same thing with our classic rayon thread. We can match them over quite easily. So if you're looking to just maybe switch out one thread, it can easily be done. So this is that testing that I was talking about earlier, and just wanted to fill you in here a little bit. If you go ahead and look at the color swatch strips on the left-hand side, the blue, the red, and the greens, you're going to see that there's actually a difference. And what happens here is through a blind testing of an independent company, they put these through what's considered simulating 100 hours of UV rays from the sun. So looking at that blue strip in particular over on the left-hand side, you can see on the left side what they did is they covered that up and they exposed the right-hand side to the simulated 100 hours. So what happened with all three of those strips there from comparable threads, they all faded. So they just weren't able to withstand the fading that would actually be simulated with those 100 hours of UV rays. On the other side, if you go ahead and look at the right-hand side, you're going to see that those are all frosted matte colors. The same exact testing was done. They covered up the left-hand side of each strip, exposing the right-hand side to the same simulated 100 hours of UV rays from the sun. And you can see, as hard as you look there, you're not going to see any defined lines that show where fading actually happened. So because of that, we're able to let you know that these threads are going to perform well out in the outdoors.
That extreme color fastness that Nancy just explained, that should be of interest to any of you who embroider items that spend a lot of time in the sunshine. Frosted Matte is a really good choice in any season. If you do ski apparel for the winter, golf apparel in the spring and summer, if you're lucky enough to live in a sunshine state like Florida, California, Arizona, patio cushions, boat covers, swimwear and resort wear, bathing suits in particular, because of frosted mat's ability to stand up to chlorine. Really good choice. And for those of you who go to dog shows or horse shows, dog collars, horse blankets, halters, leashes, those are items that are a lot of times exposed to sunshine more often than others, and in those cases, frosted mat would be a really great choice.
So working with frosted mat is very similar to working with any 40-weight embroidery thread. I did notice a question that came through, and they're asking what weight it actually is. Frosted mat actually is a 40-weight thread. However, you want to keep in mind those weights are actually created by how much they literally weigh per yard or per meter. So yes, it's a 40-weight thread, but it's slightly thinner than your rayon and polyester 40-weight threads, which is what most embroiderers are used to working with. And it really is like working with all of those threads as well, just slightly thinner. For this particular design here, it's a stock design that I found online. Kind of have a love for horses, and it really struck me as a design that would actually work very well with a frosted mat. I find that animals in general are a great subject to actually embroider these with this thread. You can see there's some multitude of browns in there that were used to create some real detailed shading within the horse itself. On top of that, the different grays and whites were used as well. And like I said, it's just like working with an embroidery thread, a 40-weight embroidery thread, I should say. This particular design, I did decide to reduce the size of it by 10%. Just so that it would fill in a little bit better. If I had left it at the 100%, it would have looked okay. It just would have been a little bit more, less filled, I guess you could say, but it would have looked just fine. Here's another stock design that I found online. Just happened to have this bag, and the two just seemed like they were a match made in heaven. A stock design had a little bit heavier or denser of a fill that was compounded by the bag that I was actually embroidering on. You can notice a nice up-close picture of the fabric that the bag is made of. Very loosely woven material, kind of thick pieces that were actually woven. So there's a lot of swales and bumps that are on there, where if you just embroider on this, sometimes you run into the risk of it just kind of sinking in there, not looking as well. So I did use a water-soluble topping. Madeira, the Easy Aqua Supreme topping was used on this in order to hold those stitches up a little bit while it was being embroidered. And you can actually see it worked really well, held those stitches up well. This is actually another example that I'm going to throw out, that high definition color that you see there. We took the picture of the bag itself up in the upper right hand corner that you can see, took the center of that image and just blew it up a little bit so you could see the actual details of the bag. But notice the stitches that are embroidered with that kind of a standard red that's available on the frosted mat. The stitches are not real defined because there's no shine there, so it really gives you a unique look when it comes to the frosted mat thread itself. This one I did go ahead and reduce it down 10% as well. So this leaf design was actually digitized by Bonnie Nielsen. She does work for Madeira, and she actually digitized it for the multitude of threads that you're seeing here. So you can use frosted mat in combination, as you can see here, with any thread. We went ahead and threw the classic rayon in there with those medium green parts of the leaf kind of in the center, did a multicolored astro with a poly neon thread, and threw in a real super twist metallic super sparkly thread there for that kind of yellowish green. The light green that you see the three arrows pointing to is the frosted mat. So as you can see, very easy to mix and match. The contrast between all the different threads that are going on here just gives it a real versatile look, I guess you could say. But again, look at that green, look at the clarity that you're seeing with it. When you don't have a reflection, colors tend, and it absorbs the light instead of reflecting. You're getting that true high definition color look. And want to point your direction over to the 6 leaves that are kind of in the background there. Same exact design, just played around with the different colors. Certainly are a lot of colors to work with, and had some great combinations as well over there. But pay attention in particular to where the frosted mat is that we pointed out over on the green. You're looking at the purple, the blue, the orange there. You can see how that frosted mat just kind of pops out at you.
Do you remember if the Madeira was done frosted mat? One of the questions that just came in.
Oh yes, absolutely, that was done. The Madeira spelled out, the font there was actually done in frosted mat as well. That was a darker green used for that as opposed to the light green that's used in the center. This is actually a design that we're going to make available afterwards so that you can actually play around with it a little bit. While we're actually still here on this one, somebody's asking about the needle size, and somebody asked if you could use a 75 or a 65, and the answer is yes. You can actually use both of those. So whichever needle you normally use on a regular basis, if you use your 7511, stick with it. Works perfectly fine. If you tend to use the 65-9 needle on a regular basis, you can stick with that one as well. If you start getting a little bigger than that, your designs just might not look as well. So this design here was actually digitized by Eric Campbell, and he's with Black Duck Embroidery. He had some frosted mat. We asked him to digitize a design for us, and he actually took the task to hand and really impressed me extremely with this design. You can see it's under 2 inches tall, just about 3 inches wide, and we're up here in the Northeast, and apple orchards are, just something you look forward to when it comes to the fall time around here. And this really is a typical depiction of an apple orchard up here in the Northeast. So it really did speak to me. But the way that he was able to get the so many details in there, and I want to point them out to you. I'm thinking that you probably can see them. But up on the top of the building itself, there's a sign up there, and it says The Orchards. In the lower right-hand side, there's a full bushel of apples. On the left-hand lower side, it looks like there's a jug of apples. Right up to the weather vane that's up on top of the building over to the left. The thing that didn't stick out to me personally right at the beginning, and the more I looked at it, having been to orchards many times, kind of in the middle there, right above the dime itself, which kind of shows you the comparison with it. Looks like there's steps for displaying products, and to me those look like bags of apples that you get to either go pick your own apples, or you can just stop by and grab a bag of apples. So Eric really did a great job on utilizing the frosted mat in this red work design that he put together.
We are monitoring your questions as they come in to us. As I mentioned, we're collecting all of them. You're right on target. Your questions are concerning things that we will be covering in the webinar, so you'll hear Nancy, for the most part, talk about that. And also we'll have, at the very end of the presentation, we'll have a kind of a wrap-up of questions. One that came in, Nancy, that I think you can answer quickly for this person. They run a Home Brother embroidery machine that goes up to a speed of 1,000 stitches per minute. Would frosted mat work on that machine?
Yeah, that's a good question, and the answer is absolutely yes. It's embroidery thread. It's designed for embroidery machines, and if you have a single needle home machine that does embroidery for you, it's going to work on that machine. If you have a 16-head commercial embroidery machine with multitudes of needles per head, it's going to work on that machine as well. I had mentioned before, embroidery thread is for embroidery. It's for decoration. So absolutely, it's going to work on all your embroidery machines out there.
Beyond the obvious improvement of clarity and logos, frosted mat can really add artistic subtlety to linens or clothing with a tone-on-tone effect that one of you asked about. One of our customers, Aztec Promotional Group, they use frosted mat just for that purpose. Aztec creates items that are sold in a gift shop of a restaurant called Abel's on the Lake in Texas. As you can see, Tone on Tone provides a faded vintage style to the swim shorts that are on the left. and on the right, with an enlargement on the bottom, using a bold white frosted matte color on top of the faded red, white, and blue, the swim shorts provide a completely different look. Nancy had referred to Eric Campbell and one of his designs earlier. Eric, I think, is the first person that I heard in the industry refer to the fact that photography is the enemy of embroidery. And we're really trying to overcome this throughout this webinar, the subtlety of rayon's luster, polyester's shine, and frosted matte's matte finish. So we hope that you're getting that with each of these designs. Here are a couple more examples of both the tone-on-tone with a little bolder contrast and some caps that were also done by Aztec. As they explained to us, they practice a current promotional trend of whisper, don't shout, in order to get their message across. The tone-on-tone is ideal for that, for a vintage, antique look, for subtle look on baby clothes, like Nancy will be explaining. Also the high-end appearance of monogramming on shirts or linens. And remember that when it's used on linens, it'll hold up to a wash water that contains bleach. So these are a few more examples and aspects of what frosted matte is capable of.
So here's an example that is similar to the leaf design that we showed you a couple of slides back, whereas we used a multitude of different types of embroidery thread. The difference between this design and the leaf design is that this is actually a stock design. I found the stock design online. Over the winter, we actually used it along with some kits, so maybe some of you guys recognize the design. Particularly liking Snowman myself, the design certainly called out to me, but I also saw within it the ability to simply throw other threads in here, you know, anything from the thick super twist 30 weight to the thinner frosted matte 40 weight thread. So pay particular attention on the left side over to that scarf, because I found that that was probably one of the most interesting aspects of this once I did stitch it out. So I chose kind of a dusty grayish blue frosted matte thread, stitched out the scarf, and then overlaid it with the contrasting, super contrasting, super twist thread that has a nice sparkle to it. So hopefully you can see that on the screen itself. The scarf looks like it was hand knit. I think that was due to two things. I think the way it was digitized and the frosted matte thread itself, and then throwing that sparkly, you know, chevron stripes on it. Kind of wish I had that scarf. I'd wear it myself if I had it. Additionally, on the Snowman, I saw those stick arms, the sled, the wood on the sled, the gray on the sled runners, and up in the hat, I used a lot of frosted matte as well. One last place was the carrot. On his nose, I used frosted matte as well. Alternately, I threw, you know, used rayon for the red bird and the base of the Snowman, and gave it a little sparkle on the shadows with the super twist. So frosted matte fits right in with the rest of the thread families that are out there, and using 4 or 5 different threads just really makes a design come to life. I did not shrink this size down. The fact that most of it was, the bulk of it was used in rayon to fill in, things like that. I left it as is and it came out beautiful.
I'm just going to jump in here for 1 second. For the lady in particular who was concerned, could she run frosted matte on her home brother machine? Eric Campbell just wrote in to explain that he did run the Orchards, the design that Nancy was showing you earlier, on a standard home brother machine. Yeah. So it's not going to have any detrimental effect on running the thread, and it's a very, very general.
Yeah, and I'd just like to kick in there. I apologize if I added any confusion to it, but it's just anything from that single head home machine right up to a, I don't know, 20 head, multi-head machine type thing. It's embroidery thread. It's going to actually work very well on any embroidery machine. The only thing you want to keep in mind, it is embroidery thread. It's not construction thread, so it's for decoration.
On any size
machine.
machine.
Absolutely. So here's a really another cute design. It is a stock design. Found it online. Really, I guess you're going to hear me say it a few times. I have a preference when it comes to the animals. I think frosted mat really plays well with the design. This little guy, these little guys, I should say, stitched out very well. I wanted to create a real nice comparison here for you to see the difference between the rayon and polyester, and the frosted mat thread. Over on the left side, I kept the design as is, stitched it out with the recommended colors to create, really cute design over there. It has about 14,000, a little over 14,000 stitches, and they stand just about 6.5 inches tall when stitched out as is. I did reduce it down because for the frosted mat side, because it did have a little bit of, or had quite a bit of fill there, so I wanted to make sure that he came out real nice. And sure enough, we enlarged the pictures of the big guy's head, and you can see it filled in very nicely. These are soft, subtle colors over here on a cutesy children's type design. I'm sure there's some adults like me that, like the giraffes as well, so put it on the scarf up there to make it look, give it a cute contrast between the two of them. But because it can actually have that soft, subtle look as well, which is very common for, some of the children and infants wear. Imagine these little guys stitched out on the corner of a soft baby's blanket. They'd be pretty cute. So here, when frosted mat was actually first introduced, which really wasn't all that long ago, so it is still relatively a new thread, there was 161 colors, and that was a decent amount of thread for when you're introducing a brand new type of product. And due to its popularity, we actually added 28 more colors to it last year, so it brought it up to 189 colors. So there's quite a bit of colors there available for you to do some shading with, and we've got a couple examples going on this page. Most importantly, I want to point out, looking over at the right-hand side with those fluorescent colors, is there are 13 colors that are available in fluorescent. Fluorescent colors are trending right now, so a lot of people are looking for those. And notice that there's a nice fluorescent blue border going on around the edge of this. Fluorescent blues are not too common or hard to find when it comes to embroidery threads. So if you've been looking for a blue fluorescent color, we've got that here. So along with those bright greens, yellows, oranges, and pinks, all being fluorescent, just this design was created to show some shading that can be done just with the density, loosening up the stitches in between the stitches and giving a kind of a cool shading effect. On the left-hand side is a design that was kind of digitized to show shading, the different abilities that you can do shading with. This particular one, I chose 3 very warm colors, the orange, yellow, and red, showing how the design can actually just radiate up and kind of looks like a fading sun on a sunset. Additionally, on the same page, you're going to notice those sweet peas in the bottom corners that are showing up on most of the slides that we have today. Those are stock designs as well. I didn't reduce the size of them due to the way that they actually stitch out. They're very open and airy. On the flowers, I chose 3 different shades of a pink and worked out really well to show the shading there. And it truly does have a watercolor painting look to it. In the green stems and on the green leaves, there's just 2 different greens there used to kind of contrast against each other, and again, gave some real nice shading. Frosted mat is really great when it comes to shading. So we've talked to you a little bit about frosted mat, what it can do for you. We've shown you some samples here, and really want to kind of wrap it up a little bit with some tips on running it. And basically these tips are going to show you how easy it is to run it. Very little needs to be taken and changed as you're working with it. Just want to keep in mind it's only slightly thinner than the 40 weight. I did notice a question that came through. Does it run just as well as 60 weight for the small letters? And the answer is absolutely yes. I think that it actually works better than 60 weight because it doesn't have a shine to it. So especially when you are embroidering, like say a dark color on a light shirt or vice versa, you don't have the shine that's going to interfere with the letters themselves. So I find that it works better than 628 with its clarity. And it runs, it can actually be substituted in designs that were digitized for 628, especially when it comes to those small letters, and it works really well. So just keep in mind when it comes to fill areas, you know, you want to reduce it by about 10% if you're going to be using a stock design. That's all you need to do. When it comes to your own digitizing, you want to keep it in between 3.5 and 4.0 for the digitizing, for the density, and that will help it fill in much better, especially in those fill areas. When I did see a couple come through about the needle, so good question. That as well, and here we have it. It's your 7511 or 65-9 needle. Either one will work fine. What I like to say when it comes to this thread, use whichever one you're using. Either one of those will work perfectly fine. Always keep in mind as well, the smaller the needle, the smaller the penetration hole, the more clear the design works. If you don't do your own digitizing, let your digitizer know when you're using that frosted mat. Give them these specs. We'll have some links after the webinar as well to give you some charts that are available with this information as well. So if you don't do your own digitizing, just let them know, and they'll know what they need to do. So additionally, you want to keep in mind the machine speeds. What I like to say here is run it at normal speed. So whatever you normally run your machines at, keep it the same for frosted mat, because it's going to run just as well as your rayon and polyester thread. I do like to point out, I like to compare the commercial high-speed embroidery machines. I like to compare them to a sports car and say just because it can run that fast doesn't mean you need to run it that fast all the time. Consider slowing your machines down by 50 stitches a minute, and you'll actually see your machine may run better if you're having any issues, and the designs can actually look better if you slow your machine down. Additionally, when it comes to those small satin stitches and running stitches, you're not going to need it to make any adjustments. Sometimes you might want to consider adding more underlay on a design, and that will often compensate and require no increased density for the top fill.
Okay, we're going to take some questions now. I'm going to take a look at some that have come through. One that keeps coming in is, will we be able to download the designs that you're seeing in the webinar? Each one of these is kind of from a different source, so we kind of anticipated that question, and we'd like to make as many designs available to you as possible. We will be communicating with you after the webinar, and we'll send you links to the DST files for as many as we possibly can. I know that the snowman in particular was one that someone's asked for. If we've purchased some of these designs, we can send you to the place where we bought it from, but we're not at liberty to hand out the design. However, if it's something that's been made for us, we're very, very happy to share it with you. Also, an easy question that I can answer. Does frosted mat come in the same colors as our classic rayon? There are colors in the poly neon that are matched to frosted mat. There actually exists a conversion chart where you can see which color numbers of poly neon match the frosted mat. There's another conversion chart that converts poly neon to classic rayon. So while the frosted mat colors are not matched to the rayon colors, you can get there from here. So you would be able to match those numbers up and get to where you wanted to, or at least as close as possible. There's many, many, many more colors in the rayon than there are in frosted mat, but you could get close to it. And I think it's thought that it's more likely that you'd be matching it to a poly neon, which we do have a chart that's available for that as well. Nancy, I gave you some questions. Do you want to take a look at those?
Absolutely. Somebody asked, what are you reducing? So my apologies for not being clear on that. What it is, you know, when you say you get a stock design or whichever design it is, you have the ability in your commercial machines, especially, to reduce the size of that design. So, you know, when you open it up, it's at 100%. So I just bring it down to 90%. And what that does is it slightly reduces the size of the design, kind of tightens things up a little bit. And it helps if you're using certain designs, like the love design there, the heart design. On this bag, I reduced it so that it would fill in a little nicer when it came to the frosted mat. So I hope that clarifies that. Somebody asked if the body of the snowman was done in rayon. Yes, it was. The white on the rayon was done, the white on the snowman was done in rayon. When it comes to polyester or rayon, I do like rayon. Somebody asked if you have to change the machine tension. Changing machine tensions is probably an ongoing thing that you should be doing on a regular basis. However, when it comes to frosted mat, it is a polyester thread, so the tensions are going to be set fairly similar to Madeira's polyneon polyester thread. So the tensions, you're going to adjust it. You want to maintain the proper tension on all your threads, ensuring that the bobbin thread is showing only a little bit on the bottom, about 1/3 of that if you're looking at a satin stitch, and then 1/3 of the top thread on the underside is going to show on either side of the bobbin. So that's maintaining your proper tension. And somebody asked, does it have as many thread breaks, or does it run as well as a polyneon polyester thread? The answer is yes, because it is a polyester thread. So again, if you're setting your tensions correctly, that's going to avoid a ton of thread breaks if you can keep that going.
Another question that came in involves printouts of the webinar, information that we can share with you afterwards. We plan on sharing as much as we possibly can with you. So the email that we send with all of the questions and answers will also have a link to the actual webinar that's been recorded, and you'll be able to see that at your leisure if you'd like to review it. We also make a PDF version available, which should be fairly printer friendly. A question that we just can't answer is, why is it called frosted mat? I don't know, other than it came to us from our mother company in Germany. It was pre-named when it arrived. I don't understand the decision to go with frosted, but it is certainly a matte finish thread. So that's why I refer to it as the thread with the funny name. It works real hard, and it's called frosted mat. Okay. At this point, for those of you that would like to jump right in, we do have many kits available. These are all at discounted pricing with color groupings that include 5 colors of each in a pastel kit, some bold primaries, and some subtle neutrals. We have a 6-cone kit of the popular fluorescent colors that Nancy mentioned. We have 2 introductory kits, one with 8 cones and a larger version with 15. The colors in each of the kits that you see here are pre-selected, and they're based on color trends and some of our best-selling colors. Each cone contains 2,700 yards of frosted mat, and if you would prefer to choose your own colors of the 189 that are available, and if you like what you've heard today and you're ready to give frosted mat a try, here's a special that we'd like to offer you as well. And you see the details here. This will be coming to you in an email. Basically, if you include any amount of frosted mat in an order, you would save 10% off the entire order. We'll email you this special along with the question and answer and a link to view the webinar again. I would like to thank everybody for joining us today. I'd like to thank Nancy Minnie for sharing her experience and knowledge. Also Fontaine Sheedy at the Aztec Group for sharing their images. Jamie Jenna for steering the electronics, and Tanner Zito for his help with graphics and the overall production. I hope that you've learned some from what we've shared with you today and that you're anxious to give frosted mat a try. Please look for the information that we'll be emailing to you, hopefully by Friday, Monday the latest, but we're aiming for Friday. Thank you very much.